Hello and welcome. I'm Steve Clemens, Editor-at-Large of The Hill. Thank you for joining us for the first session of Work Redefined, our summit in 3 bands on the present and future of work. It's our own kind of festival today. I'd like to thank our sponsors, Nokia, Qualcomm, and Philip Morris International, for their support of today's conversations. The world as we know it is in one of the most dramatic and important inflection points in the evolution of work. The coronavirus pandemic has, in a few short months, irrevocably altered how we work, where we work, and who gets to work. These changes will have a cascading impact on how we learn and prepare to join the workforce. At the same time, it's also compelling policy leaders and stakeholders to ponder anew what the future of work feels like and looks like and is, in a very real sense. Until last year, conversations about the future of work used to revolve around disruptions brought about by technological advancements. The words artificial intelligence created both excitement and trepidation. I know many of us would give anything to be having that conversation again. But with nearly 10% unemployment in this country and more than 13.5 million people out of work, we have to have a different kind of conversation. Over the next hour, we will talk to some smart thinkers and doers to find out how we can safely ensure productivity in the midst of a global health crisis. Before we get underway, a few housekeeping notes. You can tweet us at #TheHillWork. That's an easy one. We're broadcasting live and we'll be taking your questions throughout the program. You can also tweet me at SC Clemens. And if you experience any trouble with the live stream, please refresh the page. That should be a quick fix. And I'm not going to laugh at that line because, you know, who knows. Our first guest is Congresswoman Susan Brooks from the Hoosier State, Indiana. She's a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee. Before entering Congress, she was a senior leader at a community college where she led workforce development strategies and initiatives. Congresswoman Brooks, great to see you. I've been really enjoying your Twitter feed, and I love what you're doing, I guess, in the last day or two on the National Strategic Stockpile and begin thinking about it. And I'll tell you why I like it. I like it because we need to be thinking ahead about problems and challenges that are coming forward. Today we're looking at work and what it is becoming, what we're being forced to make it. And I'd just be interested in how you, looking ahead in the same way as you have been on the strategic reserve, what sort of stress points out there are you worried about?
Thank you, Steve, for having me. Good to see you, albeit remotely. I'm here in my D.C. office.
We'll get together soon. Yeah.
Pardon?
One of these days we'll get together again.
Would love that. I do think that work is being redefined, and I really am so pleased that you are talking with your listeners and viewers about it. I think it's all about connectivity. That has been, I think, the biggest challenge and yet the most important thing as so many people are working remotely. But it's also about flexibility. I think flexibility is going to be key for employers and for employees as they are either being asked to return to work in the workplace or as they are going to work now, or whether or not there's going to be a long-term time of employees staying home and having a lot of telecommuting work agreements with their employers. And what does that mean? I've talked with a number of employers, my team and I have in the district. And so thank you. That gave us an opportunity to call and ask a number of them how they're doing it. So Roche Diagnostic in Indianapolis, which actually was one of the companies that got the diagnostic tests out around the country. They have very much gone to a remote working environment. They're trying to check in on their employees, not only their connectivity and providing more incentives for their employees and funding for their employees to make sure they can be connected. They're checking always, as many of the employers are, on morale of employees as they are home, on the mental health concerns and needs, giving them extra help for taking care of children and or elder care. They're really trying to make sure they are taking care of that employee. I've talked to a number of employers I'd love to talk to you about.
Yesterday I had occasion to interview Representative Yvette Clarke about whether or not our connectivity and being, taken online and looking at new entrepreneurs out there that are struggling to get in this crisis, whether this might be a unique opportunity in a wired world for communities that hadn't really been as built in and embedded in a pathway to success, communities of color, women, looking at gender and racial disparities in the country, whether this would give us a leapfrog opportunity to jump in. And Representative Clark basically said that she worried that there were still too many biases built in and that we could do this. But I'd be interested because I know that you are very focused about women in the workplace, women in tech, and getting rid of these disparities. How do you look at this time?
Well, I certainly think that in many ways we have to level the playing field for women and people of color and minority communities. And in some ways, assuming people have good connectivity, assuming they have the equipment they need, assuming they have the ideas, I'm hopeful that whether it's a bigger company that's looking to contract with a smaller business, whether it's a government entity that is looking to offer a contract to a WBE or an MBE, that having the opportunity to come in, to make their pitch, and to have a virtual meeting will be just as important, if not important, for their other competitors. And so I'm hopeful that as everyone is spending more time working from home, that they will continue to be incredibly productive, use that time to find those partnerships and those relationships. But I do think we have a significant challenge in this country on actually connectivity and making sure there is broadband and connectivity for everybody, rural areas in particular, but actually urban areas. One of our largest school systems in Indianapolis Public School had an internet outage. And so we do have challenges, and that is a huge priority. We're going to have to make sure that every household has broadband, that every person has the ability to connect. And that's something that certainly in our commitment to America, the Republicans want to make sure that there is broadband and connectivity to every American going forward.
So, Representative Brooks, you've talked about the Commitment to America legislation, which your party is rolling out. Maybe you could share with us a little bit more about it. But let me just ask you, just point blank, a question, because you talk about broadband connectivity, and I couldn't agree with you more. And I just want to ask you the naive question. Why can't we do it? Why can't we have a kind of works progress administration style work plan that dedicates, those people who've been displaced, those people who've lost their jobs, connect them to that kind of massive infrastructure investment in the United States, to it, just so we can never talk about that again, because it comes up in nearly every conversation. And I'm just interested, what is stopping us?
We have struggled as a country to always include digital connectivity in infrastructure packages. And now I think, and we have been focused on it, I'm on the Energy and Commerce Committee, we've done it in a bipartisan basis, but one of our problems, quite frankly, have been the maps. It's been our maps around the country that might improperly show that an entire census block is connected when it's not. Or it might show particularly that an area in the rural community that it has connectivity when really only a little part of it does. So we really have to work through these things. The tech sector, working with government, has to lead the way. We've got to get this fixed. So I don't think we always know who has it and who doesn't have it. That's actually a huge problem we've been working on a long time, and in a significant bipartisan way, we've got to do that. We've got to get that work done now more than ever.
Well, look, I really appreciate.
It's wrong that I can maybe connect with some European legislators, which I've had the opportunity to do, or from Central America, but yet workers, maybe in a rural or an urban area, aren't able to get online, and because they've got broadband issues. That's just wrong. We have to lead the world in connectivity.
I really appreciate the clarity on that. It's so important. And I got to tell you, talking to Republicans, Democrats, and everybody in between, it is the one issue that seems to pervade every discussion of how we get the future right. Representative, we've been taking questions from the audience, and I've got one here for you from Zach. Zach?
Hi, my name is Zach Valdez. I represent the Society of Hispanic Professional Engineers in Washington, D.C., working on K-12 programming and career services. My question is, how and why or why not should we transition the workforce from service-oriented products such as apps and technology toward creating tangible value goods in manufacturing or production to increase stability in the labor and economic markets, especially given the return on investment often favors the new tech and gig industries? Thank you.
Well, Thank you so much, Zach, for the question. You are asking that question of an Indiana member of Congress, and Indiana, we are one of the leading manufacturing states in the country, and very, very proud of that. Manufacturing, however, has also, particularly advanced manufacturing, has become incredibly high tech. And so I have worked on Congress in making sure that students, and so thank you for your work in the K-12 system, they have to make sure that they understand the skills they're going to need. And their educators need to make sure that they understand the skills that our students are going to need as they go into the workplace. And those are high-tech skills. And so we have to do a better job teaching computer science in our schools, teaching technology tools to our students and our educators. And so those are going to be very important in manufacturing. And that's where the tech sector really kind of is a foundation for our economy. And that is because what the tech sector brings us needs to really, those skills we have to transfer to all sectors of our economy. And we have to start making more and more products here in this country. For instance, that strategic national stockpile, part of it is about bringing back all that manufacturing that we offshored to China, bring it back so that we have the adequate PPE for our frontline health workers. We don't want to wait for other countries. We've got to continue to get people back into manufacturing. We have to make manufacturing attractive, though, for students, and have to show them what an awesome way, what an awesome career sector that is. So thank you for that question.
Well, to that point, Representative Brooks, one of the I've done interviewed governors, done partnerships with large firms, gone into places like Indianapolis and look at some of the private sector, public sector partnerships in education. So I don't want people to get me wrong. There is innovation out there in education, but there's also a kind of rigidity in education and credentialing. We kind of talk about continuous education, we talk about retraining. But when you kind of go look for what are the best and promising practices of giving workforce ongoing opportunities to kind of shift from one sector to another, that's got to be part of the 21st century workforce. Are you folks in Congress thinking about that challenge, about how we make credentialing more nimble, make our educational institutions work with that kind of ongoing need of refreshing people's skills?
Well, I think lifelong learning is critically important, but I think something that we also have to do is obviously encourage, and our teachers, I happen to be the mother of a teacher, our teachers are having to innovate like never before. And the challenges that our teachers have, I think, and the different platforms they are being forced to use and forced to learn, including professors in higher ed. I mean, our education system, I think, and those who are leading it, including school boards, government leaders, everyone is now realizing the importance of improving their skill sets when it comes to technology, and I think when it comes to credentialing in other skills. So I think now is a really unique time. If we could ever say that anything positive comes out of COVID, it is the opportunity to talk about how important innovation is, how important it is that everyone has some tech skills. I'm on a Zoom call with you all right now. I've got a WebEx hearing going on in another room. We are all, I'm learning more and more platforms. I don't have assistants. Instead of all those young people always around me connecting me, I've had to learn many things myself. And that's what's happened with teachers. And I think we're going to see a huge opportunity to really lean into all of the new skills that we need, and how do we, demonstrate through certifications and other ways to reward people that these are really important skills for the future. And we've got to teach our young people at very young ages.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us. I just want to tell our audience for a minute a bit more about you. Susan Brooks is, of course, the honorary co-chair of the Women's High Tech Coalition, which is why we went after you today, and of course a member of the Energy and Commerce Committee, but also a member of the Congressional Career and Tech Education Caucus, the Women in 21st Century Workforce Working Group, the Rural Telecom Working Group, Diversifying Technology Caucus, E-Tech Caucus. You're right at the nexus of so many of the topics we're talking about today. Thank you for opening our forum today on Work Redefined. Representative Susan Brooks of Indiana, thank you very much.
Thank you, Steve, and to all your listeners, stay well and healthy, and lifelong learning, that's where it's at.
Okay, see you soon in DC.
Thank you.
My next guest is Katika Roy. We're in for a real treat right now. CEO of Pipeline, a company that leverages artificial intelligence to identify and drive economic gains through gender equity. Katika, it's great to see you in person. I loved our conversation the other day. Can you let's just get right through all the the baloney and get right down to the issue of what you're doing on the gender equity front. There are a lot of us that talk about it. A lot of us want to see a different world. There are very few who think about this stuff in scale, and I know you do.
We do. Thank you for having me. So, fundamentally, we believe, and we came from the premise that AI really is the tool to ensure gender equity in the future of work. And, we have seen that acceleration of the future work during COVID-19, in particular, with people working remotely. But one of the things that we know is that companies have massive amounts of data about their people. And the average Fortune 500 company actually makes three key decisions across their talent each year, which is performance, potential, and pay. And they have 60,000 employees. So that's 180,000 opportunities for every single Fortune 500 company to move toward gender equity. And that's actually what we make possible.
So can you just threw out some big concepts out there, and we've got a lot of people out there, but AI, workforce, fixing it. So how does it actually, can you help someone like me technically understand what this AI whirling ball is doing to create those better sensitivities, better framing, and better decisions when it comes to gender, so that we don't rush by this? I'd love to kind of give people a feel for how it works.
Absolutely. So Pipeline is essentially augmented decision making. So much like you would use Google Maps or Waze to get from point A to point B, Pipeline does this very same thing, but for human capital decisions. So what we do is we actually attach to companies' HR systems when they go to make decisions across the 5 pillars of talent, which are really the 5 major decisions that companies make about their talent, which is hiring, internal hiring, so mobility and opportunity, pay, performance, potential, and promotion. So to give you an example, if a manager writes a performance review about their employees, that actually sends a notification to the Pipeline platform that they may need a recommendation. We run that through our algorithms, and we do 2 things. One is that we use natural language processing to call out any bias that we actually see written in the review, and managers can edit that. And then the second thing we do is calibrate the ratings. That is to ensure that the ratings are equitable. And just to give you a sense of what we find is that on average for our customers, we actually find about 1/3 of all performance reviews have bias. And that actually leads to 4% of the time women receiving lower ratings for the same performance. And that matters in terms of pay, because performance impacts what you'll get paid. It also matters in terms of potential, that is being developed for future leadership roles. And we see that just in general now, right? That women are 47% of the labor base, 51% of the population, 57% of all college graduates, and yet they're only 7% of Fortune 500 CEOs.
Today, it's right now, in fact, I think the Supreme Court is holding its services honoring Ruth Bader Ginsburg. And, Ruth Bader Ginsburg is so much a part of the picture of women's rights, gender equality, and our story in that front. I guess what I want to ask is, as somebody who's been such an active animator of this agenda as well, do you worry about us regressing in any way? Have we now moved so far that we can't move back? I always worry when we lose somebody like Ginsburg. Does society regress? And do you think the tools you're putting in place, do you think where we are socially, those rights, that commitment to gender equity is secure?
It's a good question. So a couple of things. I actually wrote an article for Fast Company, an op-ed about the passing of Justice Ginsburg, because it was actually because of her. I'm a breadwinner mom, and 40% of U.S. families with children under the age of 18, actually women are the breadwinners, and I fought to be paid equitably twice and won. That's actually some of the backstory for Pipeline. I think that we often believe that we're moving forward and that moving forward is a given, and it's not. We do risk moving backward. And in fact, in the last year globally, we've actually added 55 years to the time to global economic gender equity. So that is gender equity in the workforce. And we really are at this moment, which is often called the fourth industrial revolution, this idea around technology and the faster and faster adoption of technology. With artificial intelligence, we have the decision right at this moment to choose whether or not we will ensure that AI ensures our equity, or that we actually bake our biases into AI. And we have already seen that. We have seen it with the Apple Card, which was bias against women. We saw that with the Amazon hiring app that was bias against women. We've seen that with facial recognition software, which is both bias against women and people of color. And so we have this moment where at scale, we can actually use technology for good. And it really is a both and. It is industry and technology coupled with policymakers. There are really important things that we need from our policymakers to actually move this forward as well.
Let me ask you the same thing, Katika, that I asked Representative Brooks, which is about, it's sort of an obsession of mine of whether our educational system and network out there needs a lot more disruption to fit this world we're talking about, where it's too many kind of still the old boys networks in certain colleges and universities that are a winner for takes all format. Whether we need to kind of somehow demonstrate profound success with more nimble credentialing, people. Every variety of person, all genders, of course, having and showing a different model of success and advancement than the Harvard Business School route. I don't want to knock Harvard Business School, but there's a certain kind of monopoly position that has, and I'm just wondering whether or not we need to rethink credentialing. We need to rethink lifelong learning. We need to embed a more nimble system that would itself create greater equity, gender equity, racial balance and whatnot. I'm just, am I naive in this, or is it something we have to do?
So it's interesting because I have two kids. One is 9 and one is 13. So I am living this right now. I fundamentally believe that digital literacy should be taught from the time that kids are in kindergarten. I taught my daughter to code before she could read. That is completely possible. We should be embracing that, even if children don't become coders or developers. We can look at different ways of credentialing. The issue is, what is the standard? Because if we change the way that we do credentialing, we have to think about what is that governing body that actually oversees that. Yes, I believe that's true. But if we don't have a standardization, now you have even the opportunity for more bias, because who decides? And the people who often decide are the people who have power. And so we need to think about who is that governing that will actually look at ensuring that those standards are applied equitably, which is true in higher education. And so we should just extend that and look at that more broadly.
Well, Katika Roy, I just want to encourage everyone, go check out Pipeline, go read Katika's articles, which are terrific. I just feel like you've got your finger on the pulse of how to do change in a way I've never heard anyone talk about it before. So it's a real pleasure to have you on with us today. Thank you so much, Katika Roy, CEO of Pipeline. Thank you.
Thank you.
And now I'm joined by Paul Wolf, the global head of HR at Indeed, the job search engine. Paul pens a regular blog. I love the blog. Go check it out on everything anyone in HR should be thinking about. It's a very smart place. Welcome, Paul. It's I don't often say that about HR folks, but you're more interesting than I thought you would be. The tyranny of low expectations. But I'd love to kind of get, as we're talking, I want to not have this blather, or the future of work and whatever. I really want to kind of have a serious conversation about what we're all need to be inching towards or jumping towards when it comes to thinking smartly about what the future of work looks like, what our relationship with work looks like. What are your insights there?
No, it's a great question, and we're all grappling with this. We were thrown this curveball early in 2020, and we're continuing to deal with curveballs throughout the year. I think the biggest thing for me is flexibility. And we've heard this from employees. If you think about kind of in the HR space, we've heard this from employees for the last several years. And then we got hit with COVID. And for us as a technology company with 10,000 employees, we went to work from home overnight at the beginning of March. And the line between work and life was being blurred already because of technology, and now it literally doesn't exist. I'm sitting in my office at home. My bed is probably about 150 feet from where I work every single day, and so the four walls of my house are work and life today. And it's really, the flexibility is really around just managing bodies of work versus daily tasks and weekly tasks, and helping getting managers and leaders out of this mode of what did you do today, what did you do this week, versus here are the clear kind of goals and OKRs or KPIs that we've talked about that I've set for you, and the milestone deliverables that you have, and really focusing on kind of the broad bodies of work. And that's what we're hearing from our employees. And that's what I think employers need to, that to me is the future of work. It's not where you're going to do the work. Are you going to be in an office? Or are you going to be in a mixed office and your home, or just home? It's really how we think about the bodies of work and how we manage those bodies of work.
I think that's very informed. That I don't know how we're going to structure that. But, we have the CEO of WeWork joining us in later in today's program. I think one of the interesting questions is this the new normal? Is this a temporary holding pattern into some other kind of hybrid life? And I'm just interested, as you think about it, everything from mental health to professional and social health, whether or not the new normal we have right now is as things should be. Should we be evolving towards that, which is this, your bed 150 feet away? Mine would be 10 feet. Many people, their bed's 10 feet away. So, and I'm just wondering whether these separations and compartments actually were healthier than they are now.
It's a really interesting question. I do not think, God forbid, this is the new normal, because it's, I get asked this question a lot. What's work from home like for you? This is not normal work from home. We have been home, at least for me, the Indeedians that I work with, we've been home since the beginning of March, and we've been trying to get some work done while there's a global pandemic going on, racial unrest, and economic uncertainty. Like, that is not normal. I agree with you in kind of, you've got to reframe mental health and mental well-being. For me, it is, I need to get outside for 15 or 30 minutes a day. Like, I will sneak, blocks in my calendar to go outside and play with our dogs, or take a walk, or just sit. The weather in New York is gorgeous today. Just want to sit outside. And so I think we all have to understand what's best for us. We have dogs. We don't have kids. If you think about parents, they've got the uncertainty of, are my kids, at virtual school going okay? Are they at school in person, and are they safe? And so everybody's situation is a little bit different, I think. So everybody has to frame kind of their mental well-being for themselves and do what's right for them. But that kind of gets back to my comment earlier about flexibility and leaders thinking about managing the body of work and not daily tasks or individual things, and really providing as much flexibility as possible. Philosophically, as an HR leader for the last 20 years, I approach my job with, I'm going to treat people like adults. And I think that's really what we all need to embrace right now. There is a level of trust that needs to exist, and you've got to be empathetic. And I think one thing this pandemic, at least for us at Indeed, I've seen from our employees and our leaders is certainly more empathy as they talk to employees, as they listen to what's going on. One of the things I've encouraged leaders to do is just simply start your meetings, one-on-one meetings or group meetings, with, how are you doing? And sit back and really listen to the answers. We used to do that if you were walking in a conference room for a meeting or dialing into Zoom. How was your weekend? How's your day going? And it was kind of a perfunctory thing. You did it because it was the way to start something. And I don't know that we all really listened to the answer. Now, I think it's hugely important to listen and really check in with people, because everyone's situation is different.
Paul, I'm probably going to ask you a question that's probably going to get myself in trouble here with many of my journalistic colleagues. But if you look back at the old days at White House press briefings, they were full of brilliant journalists with drab personalities. And you would have this exchange that was pretty high octane from a news point of view, but it was not filled with the sizzle we see today, where these have now become Shakespearean performances, to some degree. And so I'm just wondering what when we've all been moved online and we're interacting with your boss, or your, an employer is looking at this, how, that really excellent employee with a drab personality or might be an introvert. I mean, we've all been forced to become performers, to worry about what our backdrop is from Rate Your Room. And, all of these other factors had nothing to do, perhaps, with the quality of work we're doing. And so I just want to ask you, is this unfair to the person who's brilliant out there but may not be, a good Zoom or Skype performer?
It's an amazing question, and I think it's thought-provoking. My simple answer would be is managers should know their employees. So for a vast majority of our employees, I've worked with them in the office, and now we've just pivoted to the virtual arrangement. I know them. If I don't know them, or they've started since the beginning of kind of our work from home, part of kind of that onboarding process is really getting to know them. And I think you're going to get to know their personality, and I think almost now, by us being in different places, you get this really interesting glimpse into people's lives. My dogs will pop in. I did close the door today. The dogs will pop in occasionally. I've met moms and dads of people I work with, husbands, wives, kids, dogs. You kind of see it all. You see, kind of the Rate Your Room, the Twitter handle scares me a little. You see people's art choices and other things. And I think that gives you a deeper glimpse into somebody. And I think that kind of goes with building that relationship between, leader and employee, or employer and employee, and really understanding them. And I don't think there should be any, some people are better on camera. The Zoom fatigue is a real thing. I feel it at the end of every single day because my entire day is spent speaking to a camera now. And so I don't think there should be any rating or judgment because of that. The other thing is you get people who are really good actors who are able to put on a smile and put on a good face, even though something's going on, whether it be mental health or other things. And I think vulnerability is really an important behavior for leaders to exhibit. I'll give you a simple personal example. So I send out a weekly email. We started this at the beginning of our work from home. Early on, it was all COVID all the time, what was going on. And now it's pivoted to kind of this weekly roundup of things that have gone on at Indeed, things that we've announced, updates on our performance as a company. And I've seen more and more people struggle with mental health challenges. While this has been going on, there's more anxiety and stress in the world. And so a few weeks ago at the beginning of August, I shared in my weekly update that I've had OCD. I was diagnosed with OCD 15 years ago. Prior to the beginning of this year, it was all managed effectively with behavioral modification and occasionally kind of a drug regimen. But since the beginning of the year, and honestly before COVID, it was started to get out of whack. And then COVID sent it into a whole different stratosphere. And I was honest and vulnerable. And I don't know that you see that a lot. And this isn't about me, but it is, like, we're all human beings at the end of the day. And so I really think it's incumbent on leaders to get to understand their employees and really dig into, as much as the employee is willing to share, how are they doing? Are they okay? And how can we better support them? It's just a different world right now. My hope is when there's a vaccine that's globally distributed that works, that becomes what normal is, and work from home is a more normal, kind of existence. There are not other things going on in the world, and you may choose to be in the office a couple days a week and get that social interaction because you thrive on that, or you may choose to be in the office full time when it's safe. And so I think that's kind of that's how I think about it. It's a great, interesting question.
We're not done yet, but I just want to say I'm really enjoying this conversation, and I enjoy how candid you're being. But let me ask you another dimension here, because particularly in this time where we have people with whatever drama is going on in the back of their life, we also have people who've had speed bumps and problems in their lives. As we look at how uneven opportunity is, particularly in this country, I know Indeed is a global firm, and so you probably see even in greater detail. And a firm at your side is working with algorithms. Are our algorithms in the right place so that we're not overemphasizing, someone's pot arrest? As we rejigger and think about, how we've incarcerated a huge number of black men, or the disproportionate way in which the legal system has fallen on some people. And I just wonder, are we building in opportunities for people for second chances, which I think many people are saying, they deserve? How does a company like yours not just take the cream of the cream off the top and begin looking at, the fact that society is complex, people are complex, and we need to make decision-making and hiring around these complexities?
Yeah, I think algorithms, I mean, there's ethics and there's responsibility around algorithms, and you've got to make sure that there is not inherent bias built into them. It's interesting, there are a lot of good studies out there about, you typically find a lot of white male engineers building algorithms and building technology, and not that there is, conscious bias, but there's unconscious bias that we all have, and that gets built into those algorithms. And so companies, as they use them, really need to think about kind of the ethics around algorithms and making sure they're stripping bias out. The simplest way to do that is to make sure that you've got a really diverse team, diverse perspectives, diverse from an ethnic perspective, diverse from a gender perspective, building those. But then, if you can't, making sure that from an ethical perspective, you're stripping those out and managing those appropriately. I think the other thing is, our mission statement and Indeed is we help people get jobs. I think we should add one simple word to it, is we help all people get jobs. And about 18 months ago, we developed this partnership with Goodwill. And a lot of the Goodwill focus is on kind of the marginalized group that you talked about, folks with criminal backgrounds. And do those bumps in the road, speed bumps, I think you called them, really make a difference in me deciding whether this person should get this job or not. We've done a long look internally about, if somebody has a DUI conviction and the job doesn't require them to drive, which our jobs don't, then we don't need to consider that. And I do believe that there's a law in California that focuses on kind of second chance and kind of this reform, and I think it's really important because at the end of the day, no life is perfect, no human is perfect. We've all done stuff that hindsight being 2020, we would have done differently or not done at all, and really being mindful of that, I think is very important from a company perspective and just a corporate perspective.
Well, Paul Wolf, Senior Vice President of Global HR for Indeed, it's such a pleasure to talk about, talent and all of these kind of, nooks and crannies in people's real world as you develop them. It was a real pleasure to talk with you today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
If there's one sector that's been most affected by the coronavirus pandemic and has had to adjust, it's the restaurant industry. My next guest is a widely known chef, author, and host. G. Garvin is here and at the airport. He's going to provide some insight into what these past few months have been like and whether there's a light at the end of this tunnel for restaurant owners and their staff. G, it's great to see you, and you're at the airport. You're my first airport interview, so how is it going there?
Hey, leave it to me to disrupt the cadence, will you?
No, I love it. I love it. So I mean, right now, right, you're my placeholder for all of those restaurateurs, all of those chefs, all of those people working in the food chain and the food industry out there, as we think about not only the pandemic, but how we come out of this. What do our viewers most need to know is important?
Well, one of the difficulties for us in the industry right now is just getting people to get back to work and feeling safe in doing so. I'm here at the airport now. I have a restaurant here. And the DM just mentioned to me that, company-wide, we're short about 75 people who are just unwilling to get back to work, be it that they're afraid of being in the airport or they're afraid of traveling to work. So it's complicated. I can tell you this. Within the industry, I have restaurants here and I'm a consultant. We are doing everything we possibly can, not only to keep the employees safe, but also the customers safe. I mean, we're communicating with each other. We're talking to each other, other restaurant owners, other general managers. What are you seeing? What are we not seeing? What's Europe doing? So we are really working to get it to a place where people can actually feel safe first.
I've talked to a number of other, chefs not as famous as you, but chefs nonetheless, some in small towns, some in big cities like West Hollywood or Studio City, and some actors who have come out to really be supportive of those restaurateurs. Some are making it because they may not have the big workforce there, but some are making it with deliveries. But how is the online world either bailed out or continued to drown the restaurant industry?
That's a great question. I can tell you what's happening. People are going online, which disallows, the local neighborhood to support the business. So when you think about this as a holistic level, you've got the larger chain restaurants who are still doing okay because they've got a delivery infrastructure that is not to be, succeeded. But then you've got the local mom and pop spots where people are still not feeling safe. So they're going online and they're ordering, whether it's Amazon, Uber Eats, Grubhub. So they're not visiting the local restaurants. And that's the challenge for us, is making sure people understand that it's okay to come in, wear your mask, get your food, social distance, and get out. The most challenging part, though, is for the restaurant owner who operates sort of month by month, right? He's making enough to cover his payroll. He's making enough to cover his labor expenses, his cost of goods, but then there's not a lot of profit. So every dime matters, whether it's, 4 people eating out or 2 people eating out. Those are the things that are going to help the small mom and pop restaurants get back to a place where they can succeed.
Look, I don't want to get into your personal world too much, but it's known that you grew up, your mom was a single, mother, head of household, a victim of domestic violence. One of the things I just don't think we talk enough about in society is what's going on with people's mental health, what's going on behind the scenes. And in a world where we're not all on top of each other and teaching each other, and I think a lot of people that I know who were waiters, who were dishwashers, who were working in places, they have a level of stress in their lives, which I think sometimes we forget. And so I just want to give honor to this question for a moment and ask you how you think, what is the temperature level out there of some of these social concerns that we need to be taking more seriously, particularly your colleagues in the restaurant sector?
Man, I got to tell you, you are asking some amazing questions. Let's be honest. The restaurant business is known for guys who work hard. They slang, they bang in the kitchen. They serve 100, 250 people. At the end of the night, they like to sit down and have a cocktail. Some people have more than others. What's happening now is you've got people who are typically not used to being home, for 12, 14 hours. Now they're at home with their spouses or loved ones. And the temperatures get high. People don't always agree. People don't necessarily have a lot of space to share. So, the smaller your home or apartment is, the higher your stress levels are. Here's what I suggest. Give each other space, take walks, go out, cook, right? Get a grill. A grill is inexpensive. Go to Home Depot, get a grill, throw it up in the driveway. It doesn't have to be a massive backyard. The one thing I found, and I'm telling you, I've been home more than I have been in 30 years, but I take walks. I take the kids out. We go to parks. We kick soccer balls. We just give my wife space. We have to give each other space. And I got to tell you, the most important thing is communication. You have to understand how people are feeling, and you have to respect those feelings, and you have to understand that not everybody wants to have someone sitting next to them all the time. So space, communication is most important.
Gee, I'm all for bringing back your show. It may be out there more, but kind of start it from the beginning. We're all going back to watch old shows, so I hope it's out there. But one of the questions I have, I've talked to a lot of members of Congress, Jose Andres, who at the beginning of this pandemic had a lot of worries about the food chain in America, about the backups. And we heard, stories of, crops being burned, of pigs being slaughtered in mass and not getting to market. And it also raises the question of education about nutrition, about how to eat in smart and balanced ways. And so, I know that that's part of what you are about and what you do, but do we need to worry about this during this time? Is that something we should have some red flags up, that because of this lack of infrastructure, that we're not, perhaps we may have a group of young people or others that aren't getting the right reinforcement on nutrition?
I don't think we need to worry about it. I think we need to start educating ourselves and people around us about it. Here's the thing. I say it this way. So if you weren't eating and you weren't concerned with your nutrition and your diet before the pandemic, you won't be now. But the caveat is you have to start reading and understanding what you're eating. Listen, there's a difference between snacks and good snacks, right? And especially now, people are eating a lot more. So you've got to figure out ways to understand what you're eating, understand where your product is coming from, and also understand how much or how less you should be eating throughout the day. And define what is a snack, right? Is it an Oreo cookie or is it a Kind bar, right? Are you having a banana or are you having a soda pop? So you really have to educate yourselves, and not depend on others to do so. We can do it. It's not a red flag yet, but we've got to make people understand the importance of it, and it starts with the education.
Daniel Lubetsky of Kind Bars is a good friend of mine, so I'm going to tell him you gave him a shout out. But I want to just say, just finally, as you're talking to the audiences out there, and I'm planning to tweet this out everywhere, it's such a great conversation. What do you want our audience, what do those clients out there to most know? Do they need to kind of find that safe path both to the restaurants? Are there ways in which you think we as members of society can be doing more than we're doing when it comes to the restaurant profession?
Here's what I would say. Have a great balance. You can't force people to get back out and feel safe, but there's 7 days in a week. And if you can support your local restaurant 3 days of the week and make sure to ask questions, make sure that the place that you're going to support is following safety guidelines, right? And making sure that they're keeping you safe, and just support the business. And if you know people, talk safety, right? Speak facts. Talk to people about what's factual, not what you hear or what you see on TV, but understand the facts, right? And here in the restaurant business, I can tell you this. We are doing everything we possibly can to keep you safe. So we understand that you coming into a restaurant today is more important than any other time in your life when you've come into a restaurant. And we understand it, we respect it, but we absolutely need, unequivocally, we need that local support.
G, are you in the Atlanta airport?
I am.
This is so cool. It's a first for me. Thank you so much for joining us from your restaurant there at the airport. Really appreciate it. I hope you'll come back. It was such a great conversation.
You know what, man? It was my absolute pleasure. I'm humbled to be here. And listen, in 30 years I've been doing these interviews, these are the best questions I've ever had. So thank you for thinking of us in the hospitality restaurant industry.
My pleasure. Thank you so much, and best of luck.
Be well, my friend.
And now I'm joined by Bob Wislow, the CEO of Parkside Realty. Such a cool place. His team is behind Fulton East, the 12-story commercial building in Chicago that's being called the world's first touchless and hospital-grade air-filtered office building. I cannot wait to get there myself when I can fly again. And then my friend Josh Kalmer is head of global public policy and government relations for Zoom, a name we all know now well, a platform that's almost a family member these days. Josh, let me just start with you. I mean, how do I put this? Let me just put it this way. You've known me for a long time, and we have been talking about the digital world, the digitization of everything, broadband for literally decades, but we weren't quite there. This pandemic has now changed everything, and we are there. So both with your Zoom hat on, but on your broader understanding of the IT world, let me just ask you, what's going well and what's really wobbly we should be worried about?
Well, Steve, first of all, great to see you, and thanks to The Hill for having me. And you're right, up until 4 months ago, I was in a role at ITI representing the entire tech sector, and we thought a lot about the future of work. In that context, it mostly had to do with AI and automation and just the inexorable march of technology and how that was going to change jobs and work. And I think what we have found and what we're grappling with is at least in the short term, a very different but very profound kind of change, where it's not just that we're working from home, those of us who have the good fortune to be able to do that, and there are a lot who don't, that we need to be mindful of, but that our working from home is not nearly as bounded as work used to be. And so it is increasingly difficult to talk about the future of work without talking about the future of school or the future of family or even the future of faith, because people are now struggling and grappling with this need to separate coherently the different parts of their lives in sensible ways. And so I think one thing that we're doing well, and when I say we, I say it both on behalf of Zoom as a company and as a country and as an industry, is that we have the tools. We have good tools in place to do it. We're very proud of our platform, for example, and we're working hard to make sure that users have the security and the safety and the privacy mechanisms to do all these things effectively and securely. What I think we need to be increasingly thoughtful about, though, is the fact that lives aren't subdivided maybe the way that they were before, and that while I anticipate and I agree with Paul Wolf here that we won't stay in this state forever. We probably are in a forever changed status quo where the boundaries will be blurrier than they have been in the past, and we will need to be mindful of what that means for people and how we develop technology and how we develop public policies and how we deal with real estate in ways that accommodate that blurring of lives.
Right. Well, speaking of real estate, Bob, basically a block away from where I am, I'm right now basically at 16th and K streets in DC, and so a block from me at 17th and L streets is a shiny, brand new, just finished building that is not Fulton East. And it is unoccupied. It's very glittering and nice. Why don't you take us for a short journey, give our viewers a journey of what the gap is between the very good building that just developed but doesn't have any of that health sensitivity built into it. I've looked and made sure of this, and I don't want to knock it because it's pretty and I'd like to be there. But and what you're doing in anticipating the kinds of needs that buildings would have to have.
Well, thanks, Steve, and thanks for having me on the program. So Fulton East is a building that when we originally developed it, we developed it along the principles of biofilmic design, which really means bringing nature into the inside of a building. So we started with health and wellness when we began developing the building 18 months ago. And by doing that, we had smaller floor plates with a very high percentage of exterior glass to square footage inside the building, very high ceiling heights, 11'4" on each floor, exterior balconies on every floor for every tenant, and an 8,000 square foot garden on the rooftop. When the pandemic hit, we did a really quick pivot and said, we are designing a building for wellness. What do we do today? So we quickly began doing research in what do hospitals do to COVID-proof their buildings. And we looked at everything we could find. And we found a product, and we actually found it from Washington, D.C. area, a product called AirFix. We looked at bipolar ionization. We looked at UV lights for cleansing the air in the air system in the building. But this AirFix product is a very interesting product. It's a non-thermal plasma, which brings the air in from each floor of the building through a plasma cleansing device, which drops out the pathogens, the viruses, the bacteria, and the mold, and then brings back fresh air into the space. But as a byproduct of that fresh air, it brings in a gas form of hydrogen peroxide, about 0.03% hydrogen peroxide. That hydrogen peroxide does is it mixes with the air and it kills the bacteria and viruses in the air. But being a gas form, it also attaches to surfaces, so it kills the viruses on the surface. So we have installed this in every floor of our building. It will run continuously 24 hours a day, all year long, continue cleaning the air both within the building, in the air, and through the HVAC system itself as a filter system. And then in addition to that, we upgraded our filtering system to what's called a MERV 14 filter, which is just under the HEPA filters that hospital uses. But then we continued on to say, what are the touch points in the building? What's the dirtiest parts of a building? And it turns out that elevator buttons, because everybody touches them at every state of the day, are the dirtiest part of a building, the most germ-infected part of a building. So we looked at everything we could to find a way to make that elevator experience different. And a company called Mad Elevator Concept from Toronto, Canada, had installed previously in our building a beta test for something called a touch to go, which is basically an iPad on the wall of your elevator that replaces the elevator buttons. And the idea behind that originally was it's a glass screen, so it's very easy to disinfect by just wiping across it with a disinfectant wipe. But we wanted to go a step further, so we contacted them to find out what they were doing once the pandemic hit. And we were able to install in our building the first ever tow-to-go elevator system. And what this is our elevators were already all built in the building, but we retrofitted them with this system. So if you could imagine, you're in the hall and you go to press an elevator button, but instead you look down at the floorboard below there, at the baseboard, and like an accelerator pedal in a car, there's an up and down switch to touch with your toe. And that calls the elevator. When you get in the elevator, at the baseboard of the elevator, For us, it was a custom-made design that has 3 rows of small elevator of pedals, and you touch the pedal for the floor you'll go into, and you never have to touch anything in the elevator. So that's the second system we put in the elevator. And when we were doing our analysis of what hospitals do, which is where we found our AirFix machine,
Right.
We also found that there's a new product on the market by the Sherwin-Williams paint company, which is called Paint Shield. And it's the only antimicrobial paint in the market. Again, our washrooms were finished. We're opening the building actually in a few weeks, but we repainted them all with this Paint Shield. And this Paint Shield, you apply it on with multiple coats. We use it in all the washroom walls. When bacteria and viruses land on this material, within 2 hours, it kills those viruses and those bacteria. You do have to reapply it every 4 years, but we felt that there was another additional investment we should put in the building.
I mean, it's really an incredible.
Those are some of the major things that we've done.
It's really an incredible story set of things. I've really been enjoying reading about the specs. I imagine your tenants are going to be very enthusiastic, and lots of folks are going to be ripping off your ideas. You know, I'm interested in whether you patented the combination of these things. But, you know, back to Josh for a minute. Josh, do you see the kinds of innovations that Rob is bringing to the workspace as friend or foe when it comes to Zoom's future?
I mean, I think they're friend. Like it is in Zoom's interest that people are happy and comfortable and have the things that they need to be their whole selves. I mean, one of the things that we've learned throughout the pandemic, because we were primarily a business for large enterprises beforehand, is that there are so many other ways that we can connect people, including in office settings, including in settings where people are physically close. And so we want to enable people to connect in whatever ways are consistent with the ways they want to live their lives. And I think to a significant degree, people are going to want to go back to offices, maybe not 5 days a week, maybe in a different format, but we absolutely, I think, see it as positive that people like Bob and others are coming up with just incredible innovations to not only ease us back, hopefully, into something resembling what we had before, but to building for the future.
Thank you. Bob, are you leased out? Are you leasing your property now?
The property will be ready to open in just about a month, and we're in the process of leasing, and we have multiple proposals, and the things we've done in the building has really gotten great attention. You know, to Josh's point, we look at Zoom as a friend. One of the things that we did post-pandemic is on our rooftop, we created a large kind of stadium seating area, holds about 80 people, and we installed a new television system. In fact, it's just coming out this week, that allows you to see TV in the daylight. So we have 4 large TV panels put together to be able to do things like Zoom conferences for our tenants who, you know, may be global, maybe national, aren't flying to meetings, but yet can have people in an outdoor setting, in a healthy outdoor setting, and doing a Zoom conference.
I can't wait to visit it myself next time I'm allowed to fly and get to Chicago. But we have a question from a question from the audience from Kurt. Kurt?
Hi, my name is Kurt Cornelson. I'm a managing director with CBRE based out of Tampa. And my question is, how will office work of the future affect commercial real estate? Thank you.
So the question is really for both of you. How will just very quick answer if we could, but office work of the future affect the commercial real estate area? You know, obviously, Bob, I'm going to start with you because you're in that area.
Well, I think we don't know yet, and this is going to be a very interesting next year. But I do think that there's a scenario which says that the densification we've been having happen in office buildings for the last 7 or 8 years may reverse course. And it may actually mean that people need more office space than they have now. I don't think you're going to end up with offices where people are at benching situations, sitting directly across from somebody, with somebody on each side of them 3 feet away. I just think even if the pandemic has ended, I just think the psychological aspect of this has changed. There was already change in the workforce where people were reacting negatively to that kind of environment and escaping to other places to work. So I do think that the office will change. I think people will occupy more space. I think people will want to be in spaces that are healthy and well. I think wellness standards will become as important or maybe more important than sustainability standards, and the tenants and employees will look for that. And I do think you will incorporate things like Zoom into the workplace and into conference rooms. I think your conference rooms will have to be even more tech friendly than they've ever been before.
Thank you. And Josh, your thoughts?
Yeah, I would just agree. I'm certainly not in as good of a position to opine on the commercial real estate market as such, but I think what Bob just said and what we were talking about a few minutes ago really resonates. People are going to think about spaces and what space means to work differently in a way that I think we can't totally predict, but we'll move in a lot of different directions. We've been working to be a presence in conference rooms and physical office spaces for some time, and we're continuing those efforts, including through partnerships with hardware companies. So whether people want to be physically together and connecting by Zoom with colleagues or customers or whatever around the world, or working from their homes or working from their cars on their mobile devices, I just think we can't predict it. And a responsibility and an opportunity that companies like ours, and I think companies like Bob's and many others have, is to try to anticipate those situations and be there for people when they settle out.
Well, my challenge is that when I joined the Hill, I told them I didn't need an office space. I would go to a coffee shop, do my little video conferences, and write my articles. So now I need a kind of, I need Bob Wislow's operation to make a safe wellness coffee shop for me someday. But I look forward, to many of the issues you both talked about to become embedded in more of our world. Bob Wislow, CEO of Parkside Realty, and Josh Calmer, who's head of global public policy and government relations for Zoom. Thank you both so much for such a great conversation.
Thanks, Steve. Really appreciate it.
Come to Chicago, we'll show our building.
Got a deal. And now it's time for the sponsor perspective portion of our program. Before we get going, a quick clarification. While I am conducting this next interview and the questions are mine, the content of this portion of today's program should not be considered editorial. With that, I'm pleased to welcome Silke Munster, Chief Diversity Officer at Philip Morris International. Silke, I'm just going to ask you bluntly. I've talked about this subject with a lot of folks. And when it comes to race and gender diversity, and I meet diversity officers, some tell me they're doing real things. Some tell me quietly they are fig leaves on the problem. How do you know, and what are you doing to make the efforts that you're taking inside your company real rather than gloss?
Hi, Steve. Thanks a lot for this question. I think very close to my heart, to be honest. I think one way of knowing whether you are able to really move the needle is to measure. And I think when I started this role 6 months ago, I think I was very pleased that PMI had decided to put a chief diversity officer into the role, reporting to the CEO directly, which already shows there is the commitment to make change. And I took the time also the first months and definitely to do a lot of research and figure out what is actually working in this area. And I have to say there's more research results available about all the things which are not working than about things which are really moving the needle. But I have no intention whatsoever to do nice to haves. I read a super nice quote the other day which said, change is starting when people feel uncomfortable. And that's definitely how I see my role. I think some people have to feel uncomfortable to make a change with regards to inclusion and diversity.
Have the recent protests over racial dignity, police brutality, we've had murders in the United States, but honestly, the protests happened all over the world. Has this changed at all any of the actions you've been taking or your North Star in this issue?
Definitely the events in the US had an influence on us as a company as well. But I think the issue is even more broader, because you can imagine that as an aftermath of coronavirus, we expect that there will be more divisiveness in our society, and I think we started to think very early, like how we can prevent that this is impacting us as a company, and that this is disrupting us as a company. So we started to have what we call inclusive conversations with employees on those issues, and also have sometimes uncomfortable discussions around those topics. And race and ethnicity for a global company has always been high on our list of priorities. But I think this pushed the topic even higher up on our agenda.
You know, Silke, I had a conversation recently with one of your senior executives who has become an out gay man at Philip Morris International, and talked about that, and talked about, you know, how he had largely kept this hidden, and it had come around. This is also part of the diversity picture. And I guess my question is, what are the best practices you found at getting people that don't come pre-packed as fully tolerant, fully open, fully embracing people? How do you move the needle for people who may not have come packaged in the enlightened way that I sense you are?
Yeah, that is, of course, a challenge, and we measure, or we start measuring, actually the inclusiveness of our teams and our population. I think one way of getting people is clearly raising the awareness, because sometimes it's not those people who are the biggest issue, who are obviously against LGBTQ or who are very openly racist, because with them they are easy to identify. But I think those who are not even aware about the fact that these minorities are facing severe issues, I think that's where you really have to create awareness and understanding for those issues.
Right.
And also very important is to create allies, and inclusion and diversity is there for everybody. It's not only me and my team who take care of inclusion and diversity. Every single employee has to take a responsibility, and the senior management for sure.
Right. And real quick, Silke, I know that you've been focused on International Equal Pay Day. How is that going inside your company?
We have been last year, and I'm super proud, although this was even before I took the role, that we have been the first company to be globally certified for equal salary. And I think this is really an important cornerstone on the way forward to gender equality. And it starts with women getting the same salary for the same work.
Right.
And more important, I think it's not only the math which is done. We now know that in all countries around the globe where we are operating, we pay the same salary for the same work. But it also comes with an external audit where people check the commitment of the management in every single market, and they talk to employees, and they follow up on whether those commitments which have been made are actually followed up afterwards, and that is an overall very intense process, and we are renewing currently our commitment to this, and will start again in the coming year.
Well, Silke Munster, Chief Diversity Officer at Philip Morris International, thank you for sharing your insights into the tough work you do and the very meaningful work, and for supporting today's program. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Steve.
And joining us now to help close out this session is Elizabeth Reynolds, the Executive Director of the Task Force on the Work of the Future at the Massachusetts Institute of Technology. I'm eager to hear how Elizabeth views the impact of this pandemic on innovation, competitiveness, and the economy. Elizabeth, great to see you. Look, I was reading, old magazines. We're all doing different stuff during the pandemic, and I came up with an issue of Wired magazine from January 2000, so more than 20 years ago, and it was Bill Joy who wrote, and with the cover of it was a very dystopian take on technology, and it was called Why the Future Doesn't Need Us. So now we're almost 21 years later, we're still in it, but I guess if it were written today, I would ask you the same thing. Does the future need us?
Well, interesting way to start this, Steve. And I would say that when MIT set up this task force and we called it the work of the future, as opposed to the future of work, we weren't trying to be, clever. What we were trying to do is assert that the issue going forward was not work, whether there would be work, but in fact, the quality of that work, the accessibility of that work. And of course, the pandemic has thrown that in a curveball on that front. But just a year ago, our concerns were really about quality and not so much about quantity. We've had a shortage of workers up until this pandemic, and demographic-wise, the one thing we can be certain about is what we see going forward. We're still, when we get out to the other side of this, we still have, a retiring workforce and aging population and all of those things. So we're still in the game, and we will still be in the game. The issue really is going to be how we support the most vulnerable workers in society. And really, COVID has exposed the weaknesses of our system and exacerbated a bunch of the trends that we have seen as part of the task force work. The first, and this is a number of your speakers already have alluded to this, but what does remote work really do? What is the kind of the primary effects and the secondary effects? Well, primary effect is that about 40% of workers can work from home. We are largely from a higher educated quartile. And we are probably going to continue to work from home on some level. Right now, we're thinking everybody from about at least 1 to 3 days, probably post-pandemic, will be working from home. And so what's the knock-on effect of that? Well, the knock-on effect is that this telepresence, which my colleague David Mindell refers to all of this as, is sort of a form of automation itself. So all of those workers who used to support all of us commuting into the office, the business travel, et cetera. So whether it's restaurants, bars, cleaning, maintenance, retail, hospitality broadly, we're seeing those jobs just get wiped out in the short term, and unfortunately, we're seeing more, long-term effects right now. So those low-wage workers who have been vulnerable over time, in our society, who haven't gained necessarily in sort of the gains we've seen, are now hit hard by the pandemic and by our remote work, which we can imagine will continue to some extent. And then the double whammy on that one is also that a lot of these jobs and where we've had a lot of growth is in cities. And we expect that there'll be some level of de-densification. I don't think it's as dire as some people are projecting, but again, there will be perhaps less people commuting into cities where we find a lot of the personal services and service jobs that have been supporting low-wage work, and where you have found growth historically for the lower skilled workers.
Elizabeth, I love how you framed it as work of the future, and you've hit so many different topics that I care about, ageism, vulnerable communities that aren't connected. I mean, you've just packed in, my agenda. We could talk for hours, which we can't do today, but I hope you'll come back when we do it. But one of the things one of my questions out there, I mean, you're at one of the world's greatest research and educational institutions. But I'm wondering whether or not the way in which we've organized education and training in this country is at the point where it should be. It seems to me it needs to be more nimble. It seems to me we talk about lifelong education, but we don't do it. When I look at, an aging workforce, I look at that as talent being left on the table. Why can't we find ways to make sure that talent isn't exiting the workforce, that we're kind of, keeping it in to the degree that we can in smart and kind of dignified, ways. Are you thinking about the educational ecosystem and training ecosystem around work of the future?
We are, very much so, and it comes in many dimensions. And you're right. I think that if anything, this crisis has exposed to us where we need more flexibility and more nimbleness in the system. I mean, we think about the dramatic changes that are happening to educational institutions, as well as all the innovation going on for online learning. Our challenge has been and will continue to be the access to that education, and whether we can kind of increase that access and also make it more affordable. So our research is very much focused particularly on those we think are most vulnerable to technological change, and right now, of course, to this pandemic. But those are those from high school to sort of under a 4-year degree. How are we helping those students and those people find a path forward? Because as you alluded to earlier, we need multiple pathways now. We need to be really creative about this. We do not a four-year degree, while it's had high returns for people, is not the pathway forward for everyone. And so we've seen a lot of creativity, I think, in finding ways to get people from high school into more education. We know people need more education after high school, but what can that look like? Is that the two-year college, community college degree? And companies like IBM, for example, have set up something called Pathways to Technology, programs where we get people from seniors in high school all the way through to become cyber security technicians. You don't need a four-year degree in computer science to necessarily be a technician. So let's find those pathways. And I think also a lot of new kind of certifications emerging. And I think, as one of your previous speakers said, the issue there is we want to make sure that those have been vetted and that they have good returns for people if they invest in them.
Elizabeth, years ago, I had the opportunity to interview a Nobel laureate named Arno Penzias, and he said something, he'd already said something kind of offensive, so I apologize, folks, but this was around the onset of the internet, and he said, the internet is going to make smart people smarter and dumb people dumber. Do we now, given what we see in broadband with the coming world of AI, 5G, Internet of Things, quantum computing, and all of that which will be part of the environment in which we're working, have we dulled down Penzias's diagnosis of this? That have we begun to look at the gaps and the great distance between folks? Because I was somewhat offended, but there's a certain truth in what he shared then too. And I'd be interested to see if you think we're much smarter about anticipating those gaps than we are today, back then.
Yeah. Well, I might phrase it a little differently, which is to say that technology can be both a substitute for human activities or a complement to human activities. And what we know is that a lot of this technology is a complement for those who are higher educated, right? So if you're, a lot of this AI is driving greater insight for lawyers or something like that, or helping, with our doctors and radiologists in certain ways. And so that is a complement. The downside is some of this technology can be a substitute for tasks that the lower skilled workers are doing, right? You think about retail and the self-checkout kiosk right now. And that's an automation that's now getting rid of and eliminating certain jobs in retail that used to be there and would be there for lower skilled workers. So it is, I think the thing is that the technology is a tool, and how we use it is, dependent upon the different tasks that are involved. What we'd like to see and what we're trying to encourage in our research is to talk about not artificial intelligence, but augmented intelligence. How can we use technology so that it actually is a tool and a complement for everyone? Now, there's some jobs that are just, we know warehousing jobs. We have more warehousing jobs, by the way, than we've had in a very long time because of e-commerce. Some of those jobs will go away. I mean, we've got robotics that are going to get better and better at it. But the challenge for all of us is let's get the technology into people's hands and find a way to make it a complement to their skill set. And that's, I think actually that's a deterministic, that the quote earlier is very techno-deterministic. And in fact, we can actually have a lot to say about how we shape this going forward.
Well, Elizabeth, you've really helped us stretch out this conversation in great new directions. And I'm going to correct something. I often tweet about future of work. I'm now going to tweet out, hashtag future work. I'm going to do hashtag work of the future. I think it's a much better frame. So Elizabeth Reynolds, Executive Director of the Task Force on the Work of the Future at MIT. I really appreciate it. I hope you'll come back. This is a very rich topic and important one. Thanks so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Steve. It's been great.
That brings us to the end of our first session today. A big thank you to Nokia, Qualcomm, and Philip Morris International for their support, and to all of you in the audience for joining us. We're going to be back here at 1:30 today, Eastern, to talk technology and connectivity and the role they're playing in the present and future of work. That means like 45 minutes, come back. I'm going to stretch your legs, take some deep breaths, walk the dog or cat. I do believe in cat walking. Order takeout and change your outfit. I will. I have 3 sessions today. I've got 3 wardrobes. I'm going to do that and see you back here in an hour. I'm Steve Clemens. Be back in an hour.